trying this method of braiding my hair for curls. Let's see how this works. Ooh, that's kind of cool. I'm gonna have a fun new hairstyle for this video. All right, let's do the real video. Cheers! This is gonna be a super short video, super spastic, because not only have I been drinking coffee, which I should not do, but also my camera battery's almost dead, so we're gonna work with what we got. Let's talk about author budgets, because you guys love when I talk about money. I actually really enjoy talking about the financial side of being an author too, because there's just not a lot of info out there on it. And no shade to anybody who doesn't want to talk about it, because it's a complicated subject. Not only is there really no normal when it comes to being an author, there's just no standard. There's no like set and dried salary. Not only is it impossible to really define things, but also everybody does things so differently, especially as creatives. We all approach this so differently, and so nobody wants to tell everybody else there's only one way to do things. So this is not a video that's going to be XYZ. Instead, it's going to be more of a, I think I have 4 tips, if I remember right, for approaching your author budget and things that you can look at. All right, let's start with the tips. So my first tip is one that's honestly very simple, but not everybody does it. I don't know how else to say this except that it's one of those things that's overly simple and people just skip right past it. I don't know, but I'm a big saver. So my first biggest tip is don't spend what you don't have. I'm a really big believer in financial freedom and not having debt wherever possible. That's just a huge value of mine. I know not everybody feels that way, so you know, if you want to go a different route, that's totally fine. But I think personally that you're not really making money if the income is just going to pay off debts. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to say is that a business budget isn't just about figuring out where to spend, but it's also figuring out how to have a profit, how to actually be making more than what you're putting out. So the first thing that I think is really important is not spending what you don't have, which means that instead of putting things on a credit card, save up for them. If you want to publish a book, if you've decided that, you know, you create a book publishing budget and you want to spend, say, $1,000 or $2,000, or I don't know, maybe more than that. You guys have seen, I recently did a video on how much I spent on publishing a book. So it can get really expensive, but I did not ever go into debt for my books. Those expenses were always coming from the money that I had saved up and taken the time to make sure I had it in my pocket, ready to be spent, not something that I didn't have. Now, before I get any further into this video, I should say if you don't care about profit and you're doing self-publishing more for fun, then, you know, take this advice with a grain of salt. I'm coming at it from a very businessy perspective. I'm coming at it from I'm not just doing this as a hobby, this is my career, and I want it to be profitable, and I want it to be amazing, and I want to be able to continue doing it because there's money coming back in after I put it out. So again, if you're just doing this for fun, then spend whatever you want to spend. But this is very much my personal take as a business. And I don't want anybody to feel judged because honestly, at least in America, it's so easy to put things on credit cards, you guys. I get it. I really do get it, because they're always encouraging you to spend more, you know, and it's like it doesn't cost you anything, but eventually it does. Eventually it comes back to bite you. And I just want you guys to be set up for success so that when you publish your book, you are immediately making money instead of giving that money over to the people that you borrowed it from. And I'm gonna add in another second tip so that I'll have 5 total instead of 4, because this kind of falls under the same umbrella, but it's kind of its own thing too. Authors tend to think they're going to be the unicorn, and we just assume my book is going to do well. It's going to make good money. I am going to get all of this money back. It'll be worth it. But to quote a movie, and comment below if you recognize this reference, you are not the exception, you are the rule. And so it's good and wise to approach budgeting with that mindset that you are not the exception, you are the rule. And the rule is that you're never guaranteed to make money. In fact, that should probably be the tip. It's never a guarantee that you're going to make that money back. So never hinge your plans on I'm going to get all this money back. Whenever you spend money, just assume you might not see it again. And that can actually, weirdly enough, be a good thing, believe it or not, because it can help you to make smarter decisions if you view all of your financial spending with this lens. Because for example, if you were to go out and hire an editor and it was super expensive, like thousands of dollars, but you learned from it, it was almost like a course, like you did a class, like a college class, and you learned so much about writing and your craft just improved like 100 times, and you're so proud of your writing after working with that editor, then that could be a risk that's worth taking because you know that it's going to be beneficial to your career as a whole, even if you don't necessarily make your money back on that particular book. On the flip side, maybe you, what's a good example? Say you want to go out and hire a marketing team and you spend, I don't know, I'm gonna say like a really crazy amount, like $2,000 or $3,000. I don't really know what they charge because I've done my own marketing so far, but for example, you spend that much and then you find out that they didn't really do anything and you didn't really sell books. It was just like a flash in the pan and then it was done and that money never comes back to you. Was it really worth it? So it can help you to make decisions if you assume going into it, I may not make my money back. Is this still worth it? I'm gonna add another little bonus tip, which is not really a tip, but I just wanna encourage you that everybody makes mistakes. And so I don't know if this is really a tip so much as just an encouragement that sometimes you have to take the risk and you have to make the mistake to learn that it wasn't the right thing for you going forward in the future. Because just like I said at the beginning of this video, there's not really a set in stone, rule book for being an author. Every author is so different. And so what works for one might not work for you. Sometimes the only way to find that out is through trial and error, unfortunately. Okay, coming back to the tips that I actually wrote down. My next one, I think this is number 3 now, is focus on needs versus wants. So I'm talking about actually making a list. Sit down, write it out like a pros and cons list. What do you need? Put that in a need column. And what is more of a want? You don't actually need it. For example, in my needs versus want column, I would definitely say that I need cover design. Even though I'm capable of making semi-usable cover, sort of. I have a whole video series on cover design, like a whole playlist. If you want to check it out, I will link it below. But you guys know I have strong feelings on cover design. And so even though I've played around with making them, when it comes to the books that I actually want to sell, that I intend to put a ton of marketing behind and I really believe in, I always make sure to hire a professional who knows what makes covers sell, because that's super important. So for me, in my needs column, a professional cover designer is at the very top of the list. And right below that, just as important to me, is a editor, because a professional editor is going to take my book's quality up to the next level. So I am a firm believer in those two things. Something that would go in the wants column for me is something like character art, because it is so much fun. I have gotten some of the most beautiful character art for my stories, and I absolutely love them, you guys. I love seeing my characters done. It just means so much to me. But does it make me money? No. And so do I want to spend money on it? I mean, yeah, I might want to, but it's in the want column for a reason. I don't need to. I hope that makes sense. So everybody's list is going to be different. The things that fall under your need category versus the wants category are going to change from person to person. But it's important that you know, whenever you go to purchase something, which side of the list does that fall on? Is it a need or is it a want? And then my next tip is really a follow-up on that. They go seamlessly together, you guys, because my next tip is to budget your needs before you budget for your wants. So what I mean by that, it's so simple, but again, unless we sit down and intentionally go through and make a budgeting plan for ourselves and label all these things and figure it out in advance, we tend to do the exact opposite. So for example, if I didn't plan it out in advance, the first thing that I might buy as an excited author is honestly something like character art. But if I only have, say, a budget of $1,000 and say that I have a cover designer for $500 and an editor editor for another $500. That's my whole budget right there. I don't have any money to go towards a character artist as much as I might want it. I need to save up for that. That needs to be something that I hold out for in the future. Because remember, with our first tip, which is not spending what we don't have, I don't want to go out and spend money that I don't have. And so if I go out and I buy the wants before I buy the needs, that is going to shortcut me and make it so I either have to go into debt, which we talked about we really don't want to do because it sets you up for failure instead of setting you up for success. On the other hand, we would have to shortcut our dreams and maybe the quality of our book or the quality of the things that we actually need, such as getting a less qualified cover designer or not being able to hire the editor that you really wanted and having to go with somebody else instead. So this is kind of, again, a tip within the tip, which is to budget out beforehand. All of these things that I'm sharing with you are not things that you do as you go along and you just kind of wing it and you see what happens and, you know, hope for the best with each purchase. They are something that you want to do right from the start. You need to clarify what's important to you. Going back to the tips that I've shared, you need to figure out, what do you have available to spend? And then out of that, what are your needs versus your wants? And then how much are the needs going to cost? That's this tip right here. How much is it going to cost to get the things you need? And that leads to my last tip, although I have to admit I have a few bonus tips because you guys know I love the details and I love sharing everything that I can that can help you. But this is the one that's like a more of a foundational one, which is to learn self-discipline and learn to say no to yourself. Because saying no, it doesn't always feel good to say no to the pretty character art or to say no to spending hundreds of dollars on, you know, some fun marketing tool. But when you say no to yourself and when you have the self-discipline, you are actually saying yes to making money and to having money in your pocket, to being successful, to having a profit. So while self-discipline is not always fun, believe me, I understand, it is actually beneficial to you to learn when is the right time to say no and how much that will profit you in the long run. Just because you say no now doesn't mean you have to say no later down the road. It might mean a temporary no where you're saying, I need to save money, and once I've saved enough, or maybe once my book has been out for XYZ amount of time, I can take a look at how much money it's made and maybe I can reinvest that money into more marketing tools for that book and things like that. Okay, like I mentioned, I do have a few bonus tips. So the first one is to track all your spending. It's really simple. I just use an Excel spreadsheet. Technically, I use the one that's online in Google now. I'm gonna call it Google Spreadsheets. It's something like that. It's a very simple spreadsheet. All you really need to do, and this is applicable for taxes as well, is to track every single purchase that you make, and I like to put them in a category so that you know, is this going towards a need or is it going towards a want? And then I also track all income as well so that you can make sure that you're not spending more than you're making. This spreadsheet that I like to use is one that I give to my patrons in the Resource Club and up. If you want to grab that, I will link it below. It's also on my website in my website store if you want. Again, it's really simple, but it's really, really helpful to track everything, and it's also something I use for my taxes every single year. And then my second tip is that once you start to make money and you start to profit and have real income from your books, don't just go and spend everything you make. I think that's really obvious, but honestly, I have to admit that when I first started out, I was so excited that I just wanted to pour everything back into my books. And so kind of set a goal for yourself and how much you would like to actually have as profit that stays in your pocket every month so that you can figure out how much do I actually want to spend out of that remaining amount if you have extra. This will help you figure out how much money you have actually available to spend after you take a certain amount for yourself and set it aside for savings and for just a little bit of a buffer. And whether that's 50% or 25% or 75%, only you can decide. But just like everything else in budgeting, it really helps to plan in advance instead of making impulse decisions. And I think we all know that, but it's worth saying it again. So I hope this video is helpful to you. Again, I know it wasn't anything specific because we are all so different, but I hope it was still helpful and that you got a lot out of it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate you guys being here. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!